What is up, harvesters? Welcome back to the returning viewers. And if you're brand new here, welcome to Hobby Harvest. My name is Ken. So today I want to talk to you guys about how we are going to keep and hold bucks on a small parcel. So the first thing we need to do is understand exactly what a buck is looking for in habitat, and then we will create that for him. So the first thing is that bucks desire a different type of habitat in the summer as they do in the fall and into the winter, especially during the hunting season. And because we're, of course, trying to create habitat for the hunting season so that they're attracted to our property during that time, we want to focus on that type of habitat. So that means that wherever the bucks are during the summer, they are not going to be there during the fall. So ideally, we do not want to be seeing bucks on our property in the summer. That's a bad sign that they probably are not going to be there in the fall. So what they're looking for in the summer is high canopy trees so that they can hang out in the shade where it's cool, but they don't want a lot of low undergrowth because they are in velvet, and they of course will hit that velvet on those thick branches and tear it up. So they avoid thick cover during the summer, but they do like a shady, cool place. You find them in those big open areas. And I've seen guys this time of year, they show me pictures. They're like, hey, look at this buck. Isn't he going to be such a big buck? He's such a nice buck. Look at what he's growing into. And it's like, yeah, he is a nice buck, but I hope you don't think he's going to be where that picture was taken during the fall hunting season, because he's going to transition to the property that we're going to build in order to keep and hold him on it during the fall hunting season. So what is he looking for during the fall hunting season? Well, of course, he's looking for that thick cover. That's where we always find them during the hunting season. But he is also looking for a high quality food source. So we're going to have to put in food plots as well. Now, in an ideal world, I will always tell you that food plots are the number one attraction for your deer herd, and that is still 100% true. But that buck is definitely going to be looking for that thick cover first and foremost, and then he will relate to that food source. So you may still have him coming to your highly attractive food source. He might just not get there until 10 o'clock at night because he found that thick cover further away. So we really need to make sure we're creating both of these on our property in order to have those bucks on our property where they will stay there, they will keep there, and we can hold them there either to harvest them ourselves or just to advance them to next year where hopefully they get even bigger. So we can really keep control over those bucks in our area. So the other thing we need to keep in mind though is our does. So the reason why we do not put in summer food plots is because summer food plots will attract those does. So if you create a property where you put in summer food plots, you're going to have all of those does come to that because they're also going to be looking for that high quality food source with that thick fawning cover. And that's where they're going to fill up your property. And now the problem is when that buck tries to come into there after you're heading into the fall hunting season and he's leaving his summer habitat, he's going to come in there and it's going to be no vacancy. It's already going to be chock full of does. Yeah, he'll still relate to it during the rut, obviously. If you have does, the bucks are going to come find them wherever they are, but you should really be creating a property that is good throughout the hunting season if you're going to go through all the effort of doing this, not just a property that's good during that couple weeks of the rut. So what we want to do is not put in that summer food, even though I, again, have people I know that they go out and they're out there April, May, June, July even. When are we getting these food plots in? We got to get the deer coming into the area. We got to get the deer used to coming in. That is one of the biggest fallacies I continue to hear in this deer hunting community is we got to get those deer used to coming in. We got to get that food in there early before everybody else does so that they know where to find it, and then they can come in and they'll be used to coming to our property other than that guy who threw out the pile of corn the week before the deer season. And that's just not how it works. Yes, they'll be familiar with your property, but they're still going to be attracted to the highest quality property in your area. And if that's the guy who didn't put his food plots in until late, so he's got those fall focused food plots, and you were holding all of those does and fawns all summer, he's still going to steal your deer come fall because he's going to have a higher quality food source than you. And it's not going to be overrun by does and fawns. So he's going to have a much higher buck ratio on his property. So that's what the property we want to create. That's the one we want to make. So the other issue with that is if you're cramming all these does on your property by having summer food, those does are, of course, looking for that high quality food because they're, of course, nursing. They're trying to feed their kids. So they are going to want that high quality food to produce milk. But then what happens is those fawns get weaned and they start pounding those food plots too, and they'll have you eaten down to the dirt in no time before you even get into the fall hunting season. That's something you just don't want to do on your property. So just very simply summed up, where the bucks are during the summer is not where they are during the fall hunting season. So you want to make sure you're creating that thick property with lots of nice cover and lots of nice food sources on it for those bucks in the fall. But also you do not want summer food, because that's going to attract all the does to your area. Now, what happens when we put in these fall focused food plots is they do attract does and bucks to your property come fall. And the reason for that is because deer have their range. We hear bucks have a 3-mile range, and does it's probably, around a mile or less than that. Does don't have as big of a home range. Now, if you have the number one food source and the number one property in that range, that 1 mile and 3-mile range, you're going to attract every doe family group within a mile, but you're going to attract every buck within 3 miles to your property. So you're really going to have a nice buck to doe ratio, while your neighbor who put in that fall food is going to have nothing but does on their property. And that's if those does didn't buzz all their food plots down to nothing when those fawns got weaned and were eating solids themselves. So they may not have anything. And you'll see a lot of guys be like, man, we have a doe property and we haven't seen a buck in 5 years except in the middle of the night on camera. And these guys will be like, we fill our doe tags every year and all the trigger control in the world, it doesn't seem to help. We just have more and more does. And I mean, that's awesome if all you're trying to do is fill the freezer. That's a great way to do it. It's an easy way to do it. But if you do want those bucks on your property, you've got to get rid of those summer food sources. You got to get those deer coming in the fall, and you have to have those gender ratios appropriate so that you have shots at these mature bucks or whatever age bucks along with the does, so that you can select whatever you want for your harvest and not just be stuck with a property full of does and fawns. So, all right, so how are we going to do it? Well, for creating the thick cover, it's going to be a lot of chainsaw time, a lot of brush hog time. You are going to have to put some blood, sweat, and tears into your property in order to achieve this stage if your property is not already naturally thick. So something you can do just to get started is to go out on your property and look at all of those high canopy trees. So any of those high canopy trees, what they're doing is they're choking out all of that underbrush from sunlight. The underbrush isn't being allowed to grow because that tree is stealing all of those rays of sunshine. So you want to get that high canopy down. Now you can have your property logged off, make a little money here. The other thing is you definitely want to select cut it. So if you have a hundreds-year-old oak tree on your property that is producing an insane amount of acorns every year, you obviously want to keep that on your property. Or chestnut trees, apple trees, any of those good habitat food trees, you want to keep those on your property because they're a good supplemental food source on your property. Now those food plots are still going to be that number one food source and the one that you're going to relate your hunts off of. But having all of those other trees on your property is a great way of taking some of that pressure off of your food plot so they're not just getting pounded right to the dirt right away. But you want to open up that canopy. That canopy being gone will allow everything down near to the dirt to grow up and create thick cover, which is exactly what the deer want. That also creates browse for them. That is their winter food source once all those leafy greens die off for the winter. So this is going to keep and hold a stronger and more healthy deer herd through your winter too. So if you do have an area where you have a lot of winter kill, this will help to minimize that as well, so that you're seeing these deer make it to the next year so you can hunt them once they get bigger. Now the other thing is you can obviously get in there and hinge cut some trees too if these trees are hingeable. So if there's things like maples that are in there that you can hinge them down, that'll keep that side cover of the actual tree itself laying sideways, but then it'll continue to grow and shoot up growth down at the level that the deer can get at it, create those visual sightline barriers as well, which is what we're really looking to do here with this cover. Is we're adding the browse and we're adding the cover and cutting down on sightlines. That's what we mean when we talk about cover. So the other thing you can do is if you're more of a marshy area, you don't have necessarily that high canopy, but what you can do is you can get in there and brush hog all of that down. What you're going to do in that situation is by knocking down all those grasses and even setting all those shrubs back. My neighbors actually did this inadvertently, I believe, because they bought the property and there's a creek back there. They put a nice little deck back there with some chairs. They put a walking path back there, and I think they opened it all up so that they could see the creek, and it was really beautiful when they were done as far as just a recreational property would be concerned. But what they did is they went in there and they brush hogged everything down. They got rid of all the high canopy trees, and within months that area grew back thicker than it ever was before. And the beautiful part is this is just adjacent to where I have a food plot, so that thick cover is really helping that food plot have cover adjacent to it, because I don't have a lot of area of control there. So even though they do use that recreationally, they tend to stop using it as we head into the hunting season. It's too cold for them to sit out there and whatever, but they really did create a nice habitat improvement for me on their own property, even though that isn't at all what they were trying to do. So if you go in there and you brush hog all that stuff down, it really sets everybody back to an even playing field as far as getting those grasses away from those things like those red osier dogwood, those yellow twig dogwood, those willows, those box elders. And then they have that established root structure already in the ground. So they have those big root crowns already established, and now they aren't feeding all of that water up into a plant. So they very quickly boom a plant out of them, and it's very young, very tender, very attractive to your deer herd. And that's a great way to kind of just get in there, clear everything out, let it grow back, and it'd be so attractive to your deer herd. Now, the other thing you can do with all of those species is to create clones by like snipping the red osier dogwood and plugging them into the ground. Now, I get about a 50% success rate on doing it that way. I have other videos out there about how to like fully propagate red osier dogwood from clones. If you want to go check those out, I get into a lot more specifics in those videos than I'm going to in this one. But the other thing I've done is put them in like a bucket of water with root growth hormone. Now what happens there though is they grow a root, so you have to actually plant them. You can't just plug them in because you'll rip all the roots off. So it's a little more labor intensive, but you're going to have a higher success rate. So just kind of up to you where you want to be with that. If you want to put more time in to have greater success, or if you just want to go out there, wing it and throw some plugs in the mud and see what grows or not. But so if you were going to go out and brush hog everything, I would probably cut clones first, then brush hog everything, go plug your clones in, let those root crowns explode again, and then of course just go out there and babysit it. A lot of times you might want to put some landscape fabric down around those clones so that it kind of suppresses the grasses if you're in like a real thick marsh grass area. Of course they love wet feet, although I do have them on more upland areas of my property as well. But just getting those types of shrubs to grow are just awesome for the deer herd. Creates thick cover on your property, and you will have achieved one of the two things that you need to in order to hold bucks on your property. So the other thing you need to do is create that fall food. So we already established why you don't want to do summer food, but what is the fall food? So I target planting in the middle of August for my southeastern Wisconsin food plot, and that is in zone 5B. Now, in northeastern Wisconsin, I target the beginning of August for my fall-focused food plots, and that is in zone 4A. So if you just take a look at what your first frost date is for your area, and you can easily find that online, you want to plant these fall-focused food plots about 7 to 9 weeks before that first frost date. And I say 7 to 9 weeks because I don't want to tell you guys you got to plant it exactly 8 weeks before that day, and then you go out and you plant on that exact day and you don't have rain within a 10-day forecast of that day. You want to, at some point in this 7 to 9 weeks prior to your first frost date, have that seed ready to go and just keep an eye on the weather. If you have a big rain event coming at any time in that 7 to 9 week period, get out there and plant. And I don't mean just an afternoon shower is going to come through. If you see that it's supposed to start raining Friday afternoon and it's going to rain all day Saturday into Sunday morning or beyond, you want to get out there and make sure you get that seed in the ground before that rain on Friday afternoon. So call in sick to work, do whatever you got to do. You really want to be planting at any time during that time span, but in front of a good rain so you get good germination. Especially if you're planting those big seeds, those peas and those beans, they take a lot of water to germinate. Now you can soak those seeds. When I do planting of beans and peas for my garden, I soak them before I plant them, and there's a trick to that as well. I soak them for about 8 to 12 hours before plantings, but now this is also having to play that rain game of when are you going to plant, when are you going to soak them. They get really squishy though too once you soak them, so you can't be like pounding them around, you got to be kind of more gentle with them or you're going to ruin those seeds. But if you aren't planting too many, you can soak them to increase germination. Great way to do that. Obviously, they're going to swell up though, so they may not feed through your seeder that you're using. So you got to be careful with that too. A lot of times I just hand sow. I have hand sown grass seed for so much of my life back when I was doing landscaping when I was younger. And I've just kind of developed that skill, that finesse of being able to let seed leave my hand and get a nice even pattern on wherever I'm throwing it. So you might need to hand seed some of those seeds if they're not going to fit through your seeder once they're swelled up. But great way to get germination on them. Make sure you're seeding in front of that rain. And once you do get your seed down, you just want to babysit it. You want to see what you got going on there. If you get out there, just see what's going on. If your leaves are turning yellow, you might need to fertilize. Just keep an eye on how much rain it got. And then, of course, you definitely want to plant a variety of things in your food plots. I never plant monoculture food plots unless I'm like just stuck planting a winter rye food plot in northern Wisconsin because the deer have just buzzed everything down. And in those big woods, north settings, you can literally plant just anything and it's going to be the highest quality food source in the area. So you're still going to get all this attraction, even if it's only like a 2 out of 10 compared to like a southern food plot that's like a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10. But that 2 will actually be more attractive than that 9 or that 10 will because of the lack of other food sources. But so what I always plant in mine is beans and peas in half of the plot. And I dress that up with oats or some other cereal grain, whatever's cheapest, as a nurse crop. And that's just to prevent the deer from coming through and nipping each one of those beans and peas off at the ground when they start to grow. Now, if they do nip off peas, they will still grow after they've been nipped off, but you're not going to get a lot of tonnage out of them. The beans are pretty much terminated if they're nipped off. So you want those oats in there just as a nurse crop to hopefully let the deer munch along on those oats as they're coming up and they skip over the beans and peas because those oats will shoot up a little higher, a little faster. Also got to keep your seeding rate lower on those so they don't choke out your beans and peas. But then on the other half of the plot, I plant a brassica mix. So the other thing is it takes those brassicas longer to get going. So those beans and peas are going to be really attractive early in the season. And then they're going to kind of die off as we head into the colder months because they're not as cold tolerant. But those brassicas are very cold tolerant and they will grow deeper into the season. And the deer will kind of switch which plant in the food plot they're more attracted to at any given time. And that really helps to keep the deer coming to your food plot because you have such a variety in there that one thing in the food plot is going to be the most attractive thing at any given time. So great way to make sure they're coming in there. Again, babysit them. If I get bald spots in those food plots from overbrowsing, the turkeys ate all my seed, I get flooding in a part of the plot, I will go in there and throw down some winter rye, especially being in Wisconsin, to allow to get some growth coming up in those bare spots in the plots. Again, adding to the diversity and the variety of the food plot. The other thing I do is, I just talked about this in my last video, is I will at some point in the season usually throw down a light seeding of winter rye throughout the entire food plot, just because then I have the advantage of that coming back up in the spring and choking all my weeds out as well. And I get that late growth that's very cold tolerant as well throughout the plot. So just a good way to keep everything going in those plots. I wish you guys well this season. If you do all of these things, you're definitely going to have bucks and does on your property. You should have a decent selection of what you want to harvest. If you guys feel like you got some value out of this video, go ahead, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. It really helps the channel out. If you enjoyed this video, YouTube really thinks you're going to enjoy this one. Otherwise, go check out this one, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.